Dr. Elena Vasquez wiped sweat from her forehead as she carefully brushed dust away from the crystal formation. The alien ruins on Kepler 442b stretched out around her team like the bones of some massive creature. 3 months of digging had led to this moment. The crystalline structure before her hummed with faint energy, its surface covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. "This is it," she whispered into her comm unit. "The main data storage chamber." Her assistant, Marcus, Chen, looked up from his scanner readings. "Energy levels are off the charts, Doc. This thing has been active for thousands of years." Elena nodded. The precursor ruins were always like this. Nobody knew who the precursors were or where they had gone. They had left behind massive structures across the galaxy, all abandoned around 50,000 years ago. Every spacefaring species had found their ruins. Every species had tried to understand their technology. Most had failed. But Elena was different. She had spent 15 years studying precursor sites. She had learned to read their symbols better than anyone else in human space. The crystalline data matrices were her specialty. If anyone could unlock their secrets, it was her. "Start the extraction protocol," she ordered. "But go slow. One mistake and we might lose everything." The extraction took 6 hours. Elena watched as her equipment carefully mapped every layer of the crystal. The precursor data storage systems were incredibly complex. Information was stored in quantum states that could collapse if disturbed. But her team had developed new techniques. They could copy the data without destroying the original. As the process finished, Elena felt her heart racing. This was the largest intact data matrix ever discovered. It might contain answers to questions that had puzzled scientists for decades. "Transfer complete," Marcus announced. "The data is clean and stable." Elena connected her translator program to the copied data. The precursor language was partially understood. Her software could handle basic concepts and star maps. But complex ideas were still beyond human understanding. The first images appeared on her screen: star charts, detailed maps of this sector of the galaxy. Elena had seen similar charts before, but never this complete. The precursors had mapped everything, with incredible precision. Every star, every planet, every asteroid field was marked and catalogued. She scrolled through the data, comparing it to modern star charts. The accuracy was stunning. Stars that humanity had only discovered in the last 50 years were clearly marked on these ancient maps. Planets that required powerful telescopes to detect were shown in perfect detail. But something was wrong. Elena frowned and zoomed in on a familiar section of space. The Sol system, her home system. The maps showed the sun clearly. Jupiter and Saturn were marked with detailed notations. Even the asteroid belt was perfectly mapped. But Earth was missing, not just unmarked, completely absent, as if it had never existed. Elena checked and rechecked the data. She ran the translator program multiple times. She compared the coordinates to modern charts. There was no mistake. Every other planet in the Sol system was present and accounted for, but the third planet, the one that housed 6 billion humans, simply was not there. "Marcus, come look at this," she called. Her assistant hurried over. Elena showed him the star charts. She pointed out the missing world. Marcus stared at the screen for a long moment. "That has to be an error. Some kind of data corruption." "I thought so too. But look at this." Elena opened more charts from different time periods. All showed the same thing: no Earth in any of them. These maps span thousands of years. The same gap appears in every single chart. Maybe they just missed it somehow? Elena shook her head. The precursors missed nothing. Look at this level of detail. They marked moons around Jupiter that we only discovered last century. They catalogued asteroids smaller than city blocks. They would not have missed an entire planet. She opened more files: cultural databases, trade routes, species classifications. The precursors had documented contact with dozens of alien races. Some Elena recognized from modern galactic politics. Others were completely unknown. But nowhere in any file was there any mention of Earth or its inhabitants. It gets stranger, Elena said, pulling up more data. Look at these biological surveys. The files showed detailed studies of life on various worlds. The precursors had been thorough scientists. They had cataloged millions of species across hundreds of planets. Earth's neighboring worlds were all included. Mars showed ancient microbial life. Venus was noted as too hostile for complex organisms. But Earth's entry was not missing. It was marked as uninhabitable, with a single symbol that Elena had never seen before. What does that symbol mean? Marcus asked. I don't know. It's not in any of the databases I've studied. But whatever it means, the precursors marked Earth as completely lifeless. Elena sat back in her chair, trying to process what she was seeing. The implications were staggering. Either humanity's homeworld had not existed 50,000 years ago, or the precursors had deliberately removed it from their records. But why would an advanced alien species erase an entire planet from their maps? She dove deeper into the data, files. There had to be an explanation somewhere. The precursors were scientists and explorers. They documented everything. They would not have made such a massive oversight. Hours passed as Elena searched through the crystal's memories. She found references to hundreds of worlds, detailed notes about alien cultures, trade agreements, and territorial boundaries. The precursors had been the dominant power in this region of space. They had contact with every major species, except humans. As far as the precursor records were concerned, humans had never existed. Doc, you need to see this. Marcus had been running his own searches through the data. His voice was tight with tension. Elena looked at his screen. He had found a section of files marked with warning symbols, classified information that required special authorization to access. But the extraction process had copied everything, including the restricted files. What am I looking at? She asked. Quarantine protocols. The precursors had detailed procedures for dealing with dangerous worlds. Look at the list. Elena scanned the data. Dozens of planets were marked for quarantine. Worlds with deadly diseases, planets with hostile alien species, systems with dangerous astronomical phenomena. And there, at the bottom of the list, was a set of coordinates she recognized. The Sol system. They quarantined Earth, she whispered. The file contained limited information, just a classification code and a date, but it was enough to confirm Elena's growing suspicion. The precursors had not missed Earth. They had deliberately hidden it. Marcus was pale. Why would they quarantine our home system? I don't know, but whatever the reason, they thought it was serious enough to erase us from history. Elena saved all the data to her personal storage devices. This discovery was too important to risk losing. It would change everything humans thought they knew about their place in the galaxy. She looked around the alien ruins. The precursors had built this place 50,000 years ago. They had been the masters of space when humanity was still learning to make fire. They had technology beyond anything humans could imagine, and they had been afraid of Earth. Elena gathered her equipment and prepared to return to the research ship. She needed to get this information to the authorities. The implications were too big for one archaeologist to handle alone. As she walked through the ancient corridors, one question burned in her mind. What had the precursors found on Earth that was dangerous enough to hide from the rest of the galaxy? And more importantly, was it still there? Admiral Chen Wei read the classified report for the third time. His office aboard the orbital station above Mars was quiet except for the hum of life support systems. The report from Dr. Elena Vasquez was impossible to ignore, and equally impossible to believe. You're certain about this data? He asked his intelligence officer, Commander Sarah Kim. Dr. Vasquez has double-checked everything. The translation programs confirm her findings. Earth is completely absent from all precursor star. Charts dating back 50,000 years. Commander Kim pulled up holographic displays showing the evidence. But it gets worse, sir. We sent teams to examine other precursor sites in human space. Chen leaned forward. And? Same pattern everywhere. 17 different sites, all showing the same gap. Not just missing Earth from star charts, but no mention of humans anywhere in their cultural databases. As far as the precursors were concerned, we never existed. The Admiral stood and walked to his window. Mars stretched out below, red and barren. Humanity had been exploring space for almost 300 years now. They had colonized dozens of worlds and made contact with alien civilizations. The galactic community had always treated humans as newcomers, young species that had barely learned to leave their home planet. But this discovery suggested something much stranger. "What do the xenobiologists think?" Chen asked. Dr. Martinez believes the precursors were extremely thorough scientists. They mapped every world in this sector down to individual asteroids. The chance they missed Earth by accident is essentially zero. Chen nodded. That was what worried him most. The precursors had been incredibly advanced. Their technology was still beyond human understanding in many areas. They would not have made mistakes about something as basic as planetary surveys. "Sir, there's more," Commander Kim continued. "Intelligence has picked up unusual activity from the Altarian Empire and the Vegan Confederacy. Their deep space monitoring stations are conducting massive surveys of human space. Looking for what? Unknown. But they're focusing on areas near old precursor sites. It's possible rumors of Dr. Vasquez's discovery have leaked." Chen cursed under his breath. The Altarians were proud and aggressive. They had always resented humanity's rapid expansion through space. The Vegans were older and more cautious, but they controlled key trade routes. If either species learned about the quarantine protocols, it could create a diplomatic crisis. "How many people know about this?" Chen asked. "Dr. Vasquez and her team, the research ship crew, and about 30 people here in intelligence. We've kept it compartmentalized." "Good. Keep it that way for now." Chen turned back to face Commander Kim. "But I want you to expand the investigation. Send teams to every major precursor site we know about. Look for anything that mentions Earth or humanity, and find out what those quarantine protocols really mean." Over the following weeks, research teams spread across human space. They examined ruins on distant worlds and deep space installations. The pattern remained consistent. Earth was either completely absent from precursor records or marked with strange symbols that translated roughly as forbidden or sealed. Dr. Elena Vasquez led one of the expanded research teams. She had become the leading expert on precursor data systems. Her team traveled to a massive installation orbiting a dead star in the Wolf 359 system. The station was enormous, thousands of years old but still partially functional. It appeared to have been some kind of research facility. The precursors had used it to study dangerous phenomena, black holes, neutron stars, and other astronomical hazards. Elena's team spent days mapping the facility's data systems. The station contained petabytes of information. Most was heavily encrypted, but Elena had learned to recognize certain patterns in precursor files. "I'm finding references to biological hazards," she reported to Admiral Chen during their daily briefing. "The precursors seem to have been very careful about dangerous life forms." "What kind of dangers?" "Diseases, mostly. Parasites that could spread between species. Some kind of aggressive organism they called world eaters. But there's something else. They have extensive files about what they call evolutionary accelerants." Chen frowned. "Meaning what?" "I'm not sure yet. The translation is unclear. But they seem to have encountered species that could adapt and evolve much faster than normal. The files suggest this was considered extremely dangerous." While Elena worked to decode the station's secrets, events in the wider galaxy were spinning, out of control. The Altarian Empire had demanded access to human research on precursor sites. When the Terran government refused, Altarian warships began patrolling the borders of human space. The Vegan Confederacy took a different approach. They sent diplomatic teams to human colonies, offering advanced technology in exchange for information about recent archaeological discoveries. When human authorities remained silent, the Vegans became suspicious. "They know something is up," Commander Kim reported during an emergency briefing. "Our intelligence suggests both the Altarians and Vegans have their own teams investigating precursor sites. They're looking for whatever we found." Admiral Chen studied the tactical displays showing alien ship movements. How long before they figure it out? Hard to say. But if they have access to intact precursor databases, they might discover the same gaps we did. The missing Earth entries are pretty obvious once you know what to look for. That night, Chen couldn't sleep. He stood in his quarters looking out at the stars. Humanity had always believed they were newcomers to the galactic community, a young species that had developed space travel through their own efforts. They had been proud of their achievements, even if other aliens looked down on them. But what if that wasn't true? What if humanity had a much older and more dangerous history? The next morning brought crisis. Dr. Vasquez's research team at the Wolf 359 station stopped responding to communications. A rescue ship found the station damaged, and the research team missing. Security footage showed unknown attackers using advanced weapons to destroy key data systems. Someone doesn't want us to learn the truth, Commander Kim observed. Chen nodded grimly. Double the security at all research sites, and put our deep space monitoring stations on high alert. If someone is willing to attack our people, they might be planning something bigger. As weeks passed, more precursor sites were damaged or destroyed. Always the same pattern. Attackers would eliminate the research teams and destroy data storage systems. But they were careful to make it look like accidents or equipment failures. Elena's team was relocated to a secure facility on Titan. She worked around the clock, trying to decode the data they had recovered before more sites were lost. The precursor files were incredibly complex, but patterns were starting to emerge. Admiral, I think I know why Earth was quarantined, she announced during an emergency briefing. Chen and his staff gathered around the holographic display Elena had prepared. The precursors were afraid of something on Earth, not a disease or a dangerous animal. They were afraid of intelligence itself. Look at these biological surveys. The display showed precursor analysis of various alien species. Each was rated for intelligence, adaptability, and what the precursors called expansion potential. Most species rate fairly low on all measures, but there are exceptions. Species that the precursors marked as evolutionary hazards. They all share certain characteristics, such as, Chen asked, rapid adaptation to new environments, aggressive exploration behavior, and most importantly, something the precursors called synthesis capability, the ability to combine technologies from different sources into something new. Elena highlighted several entries in the database. All were marked with quarantine protocols. Every species with these traits was either eliminated or contained. The precursors seemed to believe that rapid evolution combined with intelligence was inherently dangerous. Commander Kim studied the data. Are you saying they thought humans were too dangerous to contact? Not just too dangerous to contact, too dangerous to exist. Elena's voice was quiet. I think the precursors tried to eliminate humanity entirely, and for some reason they failed. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If Elena was right, then humanity's entire understanding of their history was wrong. They weren't newcomers to the galaxy. They were survivors of an ancient war they never knew they had fought. Admiral Chen looked at the star charts showing human space. 50 colonies spread across 100 light-years. 6 billion people on Earth alone. All of them descendants of whatever had survived the precursors' attempt to eliminate their species. Keep digging, he ordered. I want to know everything. What happened 50,000 years ago, why humanity survived, and why someone is trying to stop us from learning the truth. As his staff filed out of the briefing room, Chen remained staring at the displays. Somewhere in those ancient files was the key to understanding humanity's real place in the galaxy. And he had a growing suspicion that when they found it, nothing would ever be the same. The journey to the galactic core took 3 weeks. Admiral Chen Wei stood on the bridge of the research vessel Meridian, watching as they approached the most massive precursor installation ever discovered. The structure was ancient beyond imagination, built into an asteroid field near a black hole. It had been sending out strange signals for months. Energy readings are off the charts, reported Captain Torres. Whatever that thing is, it's still very much active. Dr. Elena Vasquez worked at her console analyzing the signals. The patterns match what we found in the other sites, but this is different, older, and much more complex. Chen studied the owl, massive structure through the viewports. It was easily the size of a small moon, with crystalline spires that pulsed with inner light. The precursors had built it in the most dangerous region of space, where gravitational forces could tear apart anything not properly shielded. Why here? He wondered aloud. Because they wanted to hide something, Elena replied. This facility is practically invisible unless you know exactly where to look, and the black hole's radiation makes it impossible to scan from a distance. The boarding operation took hours. Chen led a joint team of Marines and scientists into the ancient structure. The corridors were vast and empty, designed for beings much larger than humans. But the air was breathable, and gravity was comfortable. The precursors had maintained their installations well. Elena guided them deeper into the complex following energy readings from her sensors. There's something big ahead, a chamber at the very center of the facility. They found themselves in a circular room the size of a stadium. The walls were covered in holographic displays that activated as they entered. Images flowed across the surfaces, star charts, biological data, and scenes that looked like historical records. My God, whispered Dr. Sarah Kim, the team's geneticist. Look at all of this. The displays showed the rise and fall of civilizations across thousands of years. The precursors had documented everything, wars between alien species, the birth and death of entire cultures, and at the center of it all was Earth's solar system. But this time Earth was not missing from the charts. Elena, are you seeing this? Chen called out. Dr. Vasquez was standing before a massive holographic projection. It showed Earth as it had existed 50,000 years ago, green and blue and beautiful. But the planet was marked with symbols that pulsed red with warning. It's all here, Elena breathed. The complete records, everything they tried to hide. The holographic interface seemed to respond to their presence. Images began playing in sequence, telling a story that no human had ever seen before. 50,000 years ago, Earth had been home to an intelligent species, but not humans. The beings in the recordings were tall and graceful, with elongated skulls and large eyes. They had built cities and developed technology. They had reached toward the stars. The precursors had called them the inheritors. They were our predecessors, Dr. Kim said, studying the biological data. Look at the genetic markers. There are similarities to human DNA, but also major differences. Chen watched as the historical records played out. The inheritors had been remarkable. In just a few thousand years, they had gone from primitive tools to space travel. Their cities had been marvels of engineering. Their art had been complex and beautiful, but something about them had terrified the precursors. Here, Elena pointed to a series of reports. Military assessments. The precursors were studying the inheritors from a distance. The reports were disturbing. The precursors had identified what they called unprecedented adaptation rates among the inheritors. When faced with challenges, the Earth species didn't just develop new technologies. They seemed to evolve physically and mentally in real time. They could adapt to anything, Dr. Kim translated from the biological sections. New environments, new challenges, new threats. Within a single generation, they could develop completely new capabilities. The recordings showed examples. Inheritors living underwater had developed gills within decades. Those in cold climates had grown thick fur and enhanced metabolisms. Most disturbing to the precursors were the mental adaptations. Inheritors studying precursor technology had somehow developed the ability to understand and improve upon it within years. They were learning faster than the precursors could study them, Chen realized. The historical records continued. First contact between the precursors and the inheritors had been peaceful. The advanced aliens had offered friendship and knowledge. They had shared some of their technology and culture, but the partnership had gone wrong quickly. The inheritors had not just learned from precursor technology. They had improved it, modified it, combined it with their own innovations to create something entirely new. Within a century, Earth's inhabitants were approaching technological parity, with species that had thousands of years of advancement. The precursors had become afraid. "Look at these strategic assessments," Elena called out. She had found military planning documents. The precursors believed the inheritors would eventually surpass them and then dominate the galaxy. The fear had not been entirely unreasonable. The inheritors had shown signs of aggressive expansion. They had been building ships and establishing colonies throughout their solar system. Their population was growing rapidly. And most concerning to the precursors, they had begun developing weapons that incorporated both precursor technology and their own innovations. The records showed increasingly desperate meetings among precursor leaders. Some had argued for continued cooperation. Others had wanted to cut off all contact and let the inheritors develop on their own. But a third faction had proposed a more extreme solution. They called it the Reset Protocol, Chen read from the translated files. Complete sterilization of the target world followed by biological reseeding to restart evolutionary development. Dr. Kim looked sick. They were planning genocide. Not just genocide, Elena corrected. They were planning to erase an entire species and start evolution over again on Earth. They wanted to give life a second chance to develop without the inheritor traits they feared. The recordings showed the final debate among precursor leadership. The decision had not been unanimous. Many had opposed the Reset Protocol as morally wrong, but fear had won out over ethics. The weapon they had used was elegant and terrible, a controlled stellar flare, carefully designed to sterilize Earth's surface without destroying the planet entirely. The precursors had calculated that it would eliminate all complex life while leaving the basic building blocks for evolution to begin again. They had been wrong. The flare hit Earth exactly 50,000 years ago, Elena noted, checking the timestamps. Right around the time the precursors abandoned all their installations and disappeared from this region of space. "What happened to them?" Chen asked. "I don't know. But look at this." Elena pulled up the final entries in the precursor database. They were monitoring Earth after the Reset Protocol. For about 1,000 years, everything went according to plan. The planet was lifeless, then something changed. The monitoring data showed life returning to Earth much faster than the precursors had predicted. But it wasn't the same life that had existed before. The genetic patterns were different, accelerated. The stellar flare didn't kill everything, Dr. Kim realized. Some of the inheritors survived, probably deep underground or in protected areas. And when they emerged, they were different. The final precursor records were filled with growing alarm. The new life on Earth was developing even faster than the original inheritors had. The survivors seemed to have gained additional adaptive abilities from exposure to the stellar radiation. They created something worse than what they tried to destroy, Elena whispered. The last entry in the database was a single line. "Recommend immediate evacuation of all installations in Sector 7. The inheritor genetic line has proven impossible to eliminate. Containment protocols have failed." Chen looked around the vast chamber. So the precursors abandoned this entire region of space because they were afraid of what they had created on Earth. "Not just afraid," Elena corrected. "Terrified. According to these records, they retreated to the far edge of the galaxy and have been watching from there ever since." Dr. Kim was running genetic comparisons on her portable equipment. "Admiral, you need to see this. I've been comparing the inheritor genetic patterns to modern human DNA." She pulled up the results on a holographic display. The patterns were unmistakable. "Humans aren't descended from Earth's original evolution. We're the descendants of the inheritors who survived the precursor attack. The stellar flare didn't eliminate the dangerous traits, it enhanced them." Chen felt a chill run down his spine. Everything humans believed about themselves was wrong. They weren't a young species that had recently developed intelligence. They were the survivors of an ancient genocide attempt, and according to the precursors, they were more dangerous than their ancestors had ever been. "Does this mean," Captain Torres asked quietly, "that humans really are as dangerous as the precursors believed?" Elena looked at the endless stream of data flowing around them. 50,000 years of fear and prejudice encoded in alien databases. An entire advanced civilization so afraid of Earth that they had abandoned. Dr. Sarah Kim stared at the genetic analysis results on her portable scanner. The data was impossible to ignore, even though it challenged everything humans thought they knew about themselves. Around her, Admiral Chen and his team were frantically copying data from the precursor facility before the unknown contacts arrived. "Admiral, you need to see this before we leave," she called out. "The genetic evidence is even more disturbing than we thought." Chen hurried over, keeping one eye on the countdown timer his communications officer had established. 4 hours. Until the unknown fleet arrived at their position. "What did you find?" Dr. Kim pulled up a complex genetic map on her holographic display. "I've been comparing human DNA to the inheritor patterns in the precursor database. The connections are undeniable. But there's something else." She highlighted specific gene sequences that appeared in both human and inheritor genetic codes. "These sequences don't exist in any other Earth species. They're completely unique. And according to the precursor analysis, they're not natural." "Meaning what?" "The inheritors didn't just evolve these traits. They were artificially enhanced. Someone or something modified their genetic structure long before the precursors ever made contact with Earth." Elena Vasquez looked up from her data terminal. "That might explain this section of the database I've been translating. The precursors found evidence that the inheritors were not Earth's original intelligent species. They were refugees from somewhere else." Admiral Chen felt his understanding of human history shift again. "Refugees from where?" "Unknown. The records just refer to the first migration. But the implication is clear. The beings that became the inheritors arrived on Earth from somewhere else in the galaxy. They were already genetically modified, already dangerous." Dr. Kim nodded, adding more data to her analysis. "That would explain these genetic markers. Some of the DNA sequences match patterns found in other species across the galaxy, but they're combined in ways that shouldn't be possible through natural evolution. Someone created a hybrid species," Elena concluded. "They took genetic material from multiple alien races and combined it into something new. The inheritors weren't just naturally adaptive. They were designed to be that way." The implications were staggering. Humans weren't descendants of Earth's natural evolution. They weren't even descendants of a naturally evolved alien species. They were the children of beings that had been artificially created by someone with incredibly advanced genetic knowledge. "Who could have done something like that?" Chen asked. "The database mentions something called the architects," Elena replied, "but there's almost no information about them, just references in a few files. The precursors seem to fear them even more than they feared the inheritors." Dr. Kim was running additional scans on human genetic samples she had brought from Earth. "Admiral, I'm finding active genetic sequences in human DNA that aren't expressed in our current population. They're dormant, but they're still there." "What kind of sequences?" "Enhancement codes. Genetic switches that could activate under certain conditions. If triggered, they would rapidly accelerate human development. Physical changes, mental improvements, new capabilities." Elena stopped her data copying and turned to face them. The precursor records mentioned something similar. They believed the stellar flare they used to sterilize Earth actually activated some of these dormant genetic sequences in the surviving inheritors. So the attack made them more dangerous, not less? Exactly. And if the same sequences exist in modern humans. Elena let the sentence hang unfinished. Dr. Kim completed the thought. Then we're carrying the genetic potential to become something much more than we are now. The question is, what would trigger those changes? Before anyone could respond, Captain Torres's voice crackled through their communicators. "Away team, we're getting detailed scans of the approaching fleet. You're not going to believe this." Chen activated his portable holographic display. The tactical information from the Meridian showed dozens of massive vessels approaching their position. The ship designs were unlike anything in current galactic databases. "They're using precursor technology," Torres continued, "but heavily modified. These aren't the same people who built this facility." Elena studied the ship configurations. Descendants, maybe? Or another species that inherited precursor knowledge? There's more, Torres added. We're receiving transmissions. Multiple languages, but one we recognize. They're speaking a modified version of the ancient precursor dialect. Chen made a decision. Patch the transmission through to my unit. Let's hear what they have to say. The alien voice that came through the speakers was deep and resonant. Elena worked frantically with her translation software to interpret the message. Attention, inhabitants of the quarantined system, she translated haltingly. You have violated containment protocols. Withdraw immediately or face judgment. Chen keyed his transmitter. This is Admiral Chen Wei of the Terran Colonial Administration. We are conducting peaceful research in unclaimed space. State your identity and authority. The response came quickly. Elena's translation software struggled with some of the concepts, but the meaning was clear enough. We are the Watchers. We are the inheritors of the precursor mandate. The quarantine of your species was established for the protection of all galactic civilization. Your expansion beyond your home system constitutes a direct threat to universal peace. Dr. Kim looked up from her genetic analysis. They know what we are. They know about the inheritor connection. Watchers, Elena said. I found references to them in the deepest files. They're precursor descendants. After the original precursors retreated from this region, they left behind monitoring stations and automated systems. Over thousands of years, those systems developed their own intelligence. Artificial beings? Not artificial, enhanced. The precursors created servant species to maintain their installations. The Watchers are what those servants became after 50,000 years of evolution and technological augmentation, Chen transmitted again. We claim no territory beyond our legal colonial boundaries. We pose no threat to galactic peace. The Watcher response was immediate and cold. Your species possesses the inheritor genetic modifications. You carry the potential for unlimited adaptation and expansion. History has proven this combination to be incompatible with galactic stability. Dr. Kim was watching her genetic scanner with growing alarm. Admiral, something's happening to the human genetic samples. The dormant sequences are showing increased activity. What's causing it? I don't know. Some kind of external stimulus. It started when the Watchers arrived. Elena had an alarming thought. What if proximity to advanced alien technology triggers the genetic changes? The original inheritors developed their enhanced capabilities after contact with the precursors. Chen looked at the approaching fleet on his tactical display. You're saying contact with the Watchers might activate whatever genetic potential humans carry? It's possible. The precursor records suggest that stress and exposure to advanced technology were both factors in inheritor development. Dr. Kim's scanner was showing rapid changes in the genetic samples. Dormant sequences were activating throughout the human DNA. It's definitely happening. Whatever genetic switches exist in human biology, they're being triggered right now. Chen made a command decision. Torres, begin emergency departure procedures. Get us away from this facility and back toward human space as fast as possible. Sir, the Watchers are moving to intercept. Their ships are much faster than ours. As if to emphasize the point, the Watcher voice came through the communicators again. Withdrawal is no longer permitted. Your genetic activation has been detected. You represent an immediate threat to galactic security. Prepare for containment. Elena grabbed her portable data storage devices. They contained copies of all the precursor files about human origins. We have to get this information back to Earth. People need to know what we really are. Dr. Kim was still monitoring the genetic changes. The activation is accelerating. Whatever's happening to these samples, it would probably happen to any human exposed to Watcher technology. Chen looked around the ancient precursor facility. They had come looking for answers about humanity's past. Instead, they had discovered that the past was not finished with humanity. The genetic legacy of the inheritors was still active in human DNA, and now it was awakening. Move out, he ordered. We have to reach the ship before the Watchers cut off our escape route. As they ran through the corridors of the facility, Chen couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against more than just time. They were racing against humanity's own genetic destiny. The inheritors had been created as the ultimate adaptive species. If that same potential existed in modern humans, then first contact with the Watchers might trigger evolutionary changes that would prove the ancient fears correct. Behind them, the facility systems began shutting down. The Watchers were taking control of precursor installations throughout the region. Soon, they would control all the evidence of humanity's true origins. But they were too late to stop the genetic activation that had already the real test of humanity's dangerous potential was about to begin. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called within hours of Admiral Chen's desperate transmission from the edge of human space. Representatives from dozens of species crowded into the massive chamber on Vega Prime. The air was thick with tension, and the strange mix of atmospheric gases needed to support so many different biological systems. Elena Vasquez stood at the central podium, her hands shaking slightly as she prepared to address the assembled aliens. Behind her, holographic displays showed the evidence they had recovered from the precursor facility. The truth about humanity's origins that would change everything. Honorable delegates, she began, her voice carrying across the vast chamber. What I am about to share will challenge everything our civilizations believe about human history. The Altarian ambassador, a towering reptilian being with golden scales, hissed his displeasure. Humans demand emergency sessions to share fairy tales? Your species grows more arrogant each day. This is not arrogance, Elena replied calmly. This is survival. For all of us. She activated the first holographic display. Ancient star charts filled the air above the assembly, showing the missing Earth entries that had started their investigation. 3 months ago, we discovered that humanity's homeworld was deliberately erased from all precursor historical records. Today we know why. The chamber fell silent as Elena explained their discoveries. The true history of the inheritors. The precursor genocide attempt. The genetic modifications that made humans the descendants of an artificially created species designed for unlimited adaptation. You lie, snarled the Altarian ambassador. Humans are primitives, young species with barely 3 centuries of space travel. That's what we all believed, Elena agreed, but the genetic evidence is undeniable. Dr. Sarah Kim stepped forward with her analysis. Human DNA contains genetic sequences from at least 6 different alien species, combined in ways that don't occur naturally. We are the inheritors of an ancient genetic engineering project. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the assembly. The Vegan representative, an ancient being whose species had been exploring space for over 10,000 years, spoke in a voice like wind through crystal. If this were true, we would have detected such modifications in human biology during first contact. The modifications were dormant, Dr. Kim explained, inactive until triggered by specific conditions. Contact with sufficiently advanced alien technology appears to be one of those triggers. As if summoned by her words, the chamber's emergency alert systems activated. A new voice filled the assembly hall, cold, mechanical, and speaking in the ancient precursor dialect. Attention, inhabitants of Sector 7. This is the Watcher fleet. We are assuming direct control of this system for the implementation of containment protocols. Elena felt her blood run cold. The Watchers had found them. Admiral Chen's voice came through the emergency communicators. Massive fleet dropping out of hyperspace around Vega Prime. Unknown vessel configurations. They're demanding the immediate surrender of all human representatives for containment. The Vegan representative was the first to recover from the shock. Watchers? The precursor servants became independent? Elena nodded. They've been monitoring this region of space for 50,000 years, waiting for signs that the inheritor genetic line had survived. Our expansion into space triggered their attention. The Watcher transmission continued. The human species carries the inheritor modifications identified as a Class 5 galactic threat. All humans must be contained until final disposition can be determined. Final disposition? The Altarian ambassador demanded. Elena's translation, software processed the precursor terminology. Extermination, she said quietly. Panic began to spread through the assembly. Delegates argued in dozens of languages as the implications became clear. If the Watchers were willing to attack Vega, primed to capture human representatives, nowhere in known space would be safe. "How many ships?" asked the Centaurian delegate. Admiral Chen's voice was grim. "Preliminary scans show over 300 vessels. Technology beyond anything in our databases. They're demanding the assembly surrender all humans within 1 hour." Elena made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Instead of pleading for protection or trying to hide, she stood straighter and addressed the assembly with absolute honesty. "Delegates, I won't lie to you. The Watchers are right about one thing. Humans do carry genetic modifications that make us extremely adaptable. Under stress, we can develop new capabilities rapidly. We can learn and integrate technology from multiple sources. We can evolve physically and mentally within single generations." She gestured to Dr. Kim, who displayed real-time genetic scans she had been taking throughout the council session. "Since we arrived at Vega Prime and began interacting with your various technologies and biological systems, human genetic activity has increased by 300%. We are literally adapting to your presence as we speak." The chamber erupted in fearful voices. Several delegates began calling for the immediate expulsion of all humans from the system. "Wait," Elena called out. "Let me finish. Yes, we carry the potential the precursors feared. But look at what we've done with that potential." She activated new holographic displays showing human colonies throughout space. "We have lived alongside dozens of alien species for almost 3 centuries. We have formed alliances, shared technology, and built cooperative settlements on hundreds of worlds." The displays showed human-Altarian joint colonies, human-vegan trade stations, and mixed-species research facilities. The precursors were afraid we would dominate the galaxy through force and aggression. But look at the reality. We've built bridges between species that had been enemies for millennia. We've shared our adaptive abilities to help solve problems that individual species couldn't handle alone. Dr. Kim stepped forward with additional data. "The genetic modifications in human DNA don't just make us individually adaptable, they make us capable of forming stable symbiotic relationships with other species. We can literally adapt our biology to be compatible with alien partners." Elena nodded. "The inheritors were designed to be the ultimate survivors, but survival doesn't have to mean domination. It can mean cooperation." The Watcher transmission interrupted her speech. "1 hour has expired. We are implementing containment protocols for all human vessels in this system." Energy beams lanced down from orbit, disabling human ships throughout the Vega system. But the Watchers had made a critical error. They had targeted only human vessels, leaving the ships of other species untouched. The Altarian ambassador, who had been Elena's harshest critic, stood suddenly. "The Watchers attack ships in our sovereign space without provocation. This is an act of war against the Galactic Council." Other delegates began expressing similar outrage. The Watchers had focused so completely on the human threat that they had ignored galactic politics. Elena saw her opportunity. "Honorable delegates, the Watchers represent the same thinking that drove the precursors to attempt genocide 50,000 years ago. They see adaptation and diversity as threats to be eliminated." She gestured to the mixed assembly around her. "But look at this chamber. Dozens of species working together despite biological and cultural differences. This cooperation is exactly what the precursors could never achieve." The vegan representative spoke in their crystalline voice. "The human proposal has merit. Their species has indeed proven capable of cooperation rather than domination." "More than capable," added the Centaurian delegate. "Human colonies have helped resolve resource conflicts between our species and the Altarians on 6 different worlds." Elena felt a surge of hope. The precursors failed because they tried to eliminate difference and diversity. They saw adaptation as a threat because they couldn't adapt themselves, but we can prove them wrong. Admiral Chen's voice came through the communicators again. "Elena, you need to see this. The Watcher ships are showing signs of confusion. Their formation is breaking up." Dr. Kim was monitoring her genetic scanners with excitement. The adaptive sequences are activating in humans throughout the system. But not just individually. There's some kind of network effect. Humans are sharing adaptive information instantaneously across space. Elena understood immediately. We're not just individually adaptive, we're collectively adaptive. The entire human species is functioning as a single learning organism. The implications were staggering. If humans could share adaptive information instantaneously, they could respond to threats faster than any individual species could manage. But more importantly, they could share solutions, innovations, and cooperative strategies just as quickly. The Watcher fleet began to withdraw from Vega Prime. Their transmissions indicated growing confusion about human capabilities. They had expected to face the aggressive expansion of the ancient inheritors. Instead, they were confronting a species that became stronger through cooperation with potential enemies. Elena addressed the assembly one final time. The precursors feared the inheritors because they couldn't understand that strength doesn't have to come from domination. The Watchers fear us for the same reason. But we've proven that adaptation can create cooperation instead of conflict.